Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Melissa. I'm the president of the Nashoba Valley Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us for a virtual conversation with Congressman Joe Kennedy. I want to thank our public policy series sponsor, Mount Wachusett Community College. Today, we are joined by Rachel from Mount Wachusett Community College, and Rachel is going to introduce our guest speaker. But first, can you tell us what is happening at the college right now, Rachel?
Thank you, Melissa. So like everyone else, MWCC has been figuring out how to move forward with our mission in this very strange time. Our top priority is to meet the educational needs of our students during these unprecedented times, and we will be moving most of our college credit courses to remote learning for fall, with small in-person labs and courses where remote learning is not feasible, and appropriate social distancing and following public health and safety guidelines. In addition, our student support, such as tutoring and advising, will remain to support our students' success. We recognize that life happens, and we encourage our students to keep learning and pursuing their educational goals. I myself oversee the Lifelong Learning and Workforce Development Division, and our mission echoes the overarching college mission to provide relevant, high-quality opportunities and services that respond to diverse student, business, and community needs, foster student and business success, and stimulate civic, workforce, and economic vitality. Early on in this health crisis, we pivoted our corporate training. We recently finished a pre-apprenticeship leaders training for a local manufacturing company by successfully moving it online and graduated 15 employees. We just learned that we've got two workforce training fund grants, both around the $200,000 level, that we helped our local businesses write. And we've been funded to do the training for them on a hybrid model, and we're working that out. We're going to be doing group leadership training, management training, lean training, technical skills, customer service, financial skills, and basic personal computer skills. We're working with Mass Hire to provide training in manufacturing, healthcare, and IT skills for the unemployed and underemployed. We've moved our entire ESL and adult education programs to an online environment, finding new and innovative ways to engage those students. While the entire world has shifted in how it operates, we've remained committed to finding a way to meet our mission. Which brings us to our speaker today. Congressman Joe Kennedy III currently represents the 4th District in Massachusetts. He is here today to talk to us about why he is running for the Senate. Reading from his campaign bio, Congressman Joe Kennedy III has dedicated his career to social and economic justice. He is fighting for the basic dignity of every American family and a politics that is inclusive, representative, and fair. A former Peace Corps member, legal aid volunteer, and assistant district attorney, Joe has worked tirelessly for the people most at risk, most marginalized, and most in need. He ran for office to tackle the systemic inequities from healthcare to housing to climate and education that have left countless American families locked out and left behind. Over his 4 terms in the House of Representatives, Joe has emerged as a national figure in the Democratic Party's most pivotal debates. From his headline-making fights for affordable healthcare and compassionate immigration policy to his legislative leadership on issues like mental health parity and civil rights, Joe has become one of the Trump era's most powerful voices for moral clarity. A rising political leader, Joe has seized the challenges of his generation, from his striking critique of American capitalism to his vision for a better foreign policy, his powerful response to conservative abuse of religious liberty, and his voice for climate change justice. And with that, I turn it over to Representative Kennedy.
Thanks so much, Rachel. I'm really grateful for the kind introduction. Melissa, thank you for pulling everybody together here today. I'm grateful for the opportunity and very much look forward to turning this into a discussion and taking up these questions. I think when our team got together to try to facilitate this, the goal was, at least for me, to keep the speeches short and hopefully dive right into questions as quickly as we can, because I'm not so sure you need to hear a whole lot of pontification from me. So let me just say, I think we're at a particularly challenging time in our country on an awful lot of levels. And I think that we have the opportunity to come out of this period as a stronger, fairer, more resilient country. But that's going to take an awful lot of work, an awful lot of work to address the issues of social and racial justice that we're seeing motivate people into our streets, an awful lot of work in strengthening our healthcare sector to make sure we are never vulnerable to a threat like we've seen with COVID-19. A lot of work in our supply chains to make sure that we actually strengthen the resiliency of our economy and are not as dependent on other nations that don't not necessarily share our interests for critical aspects that support our country. And a lot of work to make sure we rebuild on our economy, an economy that is powered by small businesses, an economy that helps ensure that we have a robust, and we need to do more to provide for this, but a robust middle class, an economy that provides access to a middle class where people can actually afford to live in the communities that they serve and that they work in. And making sure that we do not end up in a position where so much of our economy is dominated by such large players, right? We've seen massive consolidation across telecommunications, across tech, across airlines, across insurance. And that the risk of capture there means not just lack of competition, not just lack of choices, but it is in fact small businesses that are responsible for the vast majority of job growth. It's small businesses that are responsible for the preservation of a middle-class lifestyle in suburban America and in rural America. And so we need to make sure we've got federal policies that are trying to make sure that are protecting and helping small businesses to prosper. And so very much look forward to the conversation. Happy to get into any questions. I am cognizant of the nonpartisan nature of the chamber. I want to respect that. This is also the visit was organized for a campaign team. So if you're comfortable with it, if you have questions that are campaign related, I'm happy to lean into those a bit more than I would in other circumstances, but I want to be respectful of that as well. So whatever you guys got, let me know. And thank you.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have any questions? Suddenly everybody's going to be shy.
I know that feeling.
Melissa, I'll go.
Perfect, thank you.
Hey, Congressman, Matt Keswick. I'm a consultant, do public policy work on behalf of the chamber, lobbyist by trade. But I work with Melissa.
You or BC, because I can't quite tell the colors. You see Boston. There you go. Cheers. Not that BU is bad, but I live across the street from BC. So.
All right.
Salud. This Dunkin' Donuts came from that Dunkin' Donut across the street.
Oh, the one by the T-stop?
Yeah, there you go.
No ice cream?
Not yet. I got it. You will probably hear I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old that are, one of whom is definitely not sleeping, one of whom is supposed to be sleeping, but normally the bribe on that is White Mountain Creamery at some point. So, and it's an excuse.
Is that some of their artwork behind you?
Yes, which, not that you were asking, but I comment on the nature of politics these days. Somebody on social media was hating on that artwork behind me. I was like, it's from a 2-year-old, right? I mean, man, it's a tough spot when you're making fun of a 2-year-old's artwork, but regardless, yikes.
Right.
So my artwork is not much better, to be sure, but so yes, to your question, Matt, sorry.
Yeah, I do a lot of public policy consulting work with the chamber, and we've done a number of things on jobs and unemployment and focusing on the CARES Act and the PPP financing. We've done a number of events with lenders and trying to get people in the pipeline. And it seems a lot of those programs are slowly winding down. I think the deadline is approaching for the PPP funding, and I think they're pretty close to being maxed out. But we're not there yet in Massachusetts. I think we have 16% unemployment right now.
Yep.
So do you see at the federal level anything passing both houses of Congress and getting signed by the president? You know, there's a lot of dysfunction in DC these days, but you know, another $1,200 rebate check, another lending program, Main Street lending program. A lot of the members of the chamber, the 650 members of the chamber, are desperate for funding. Some of them haven't even opened yet.
Yeah. So Matt, a lot in there, and yes is the short answer. My crystal ball about politics and policy these days is rather murky, and I think if anybody challenges you to say that they know what exactly is going to come, I tell them to shake that crystal ball a little bit harder. But here's what I would say, and a bit of the politics and the policy here. So one, The fact is that communities need it. Communities across Massachusetts need it. We were hit obviously disproportionately hard from the impact of this virus and the ensuing economic shutdown from it. So we need it desperately. But as we're also seeing, other parts of the country are potentially about to be in greater need for it. We're seeing increasing rates of infection in over 20 states across the country. You're seeing the governor of Texas issued essentially a stay-at-home recommendation, if not an order, but urging people to stay home. Now, this is a same governor that up until yesterday was still saying that he was not taking his pedal off the gas from the reopening. Now, to put that in perspective, Texas still has fewer diagnosed cases than Massachusetts does. And we have a population smaller than the population of Houston, right? So we got hit a lot harder than Texas has been. But that rate of increase in Texas, I've got my in-laws live in Texas, and it is starting to get much more real for them than it was before. So when we start seeing this rate of increase as much as that is accelerating, and granted from fairly low numbers in places like Arizona, but that increase is now accelerating quite rapidly. If they can't get a handle on it, what that means is they're essentially going to be a couple months behind where we were. And those communities are going to need assistance, one. Two, you probably saw the news, over 2,000 teachers have been laid off across our state already. Now, Massachusetts, you'll know these numbers even better than I will, Matt, but just for round numbers' sake, we have about a $42 billion budget in Massachusetts. There's a $7 billion budget shortfall. And remember, that came for this current fiscal year, and that happened just between essentially St. Patrick's Day and June 30th, which is an enormous shortfall given that time period. That means, though, that the State House has to somehow find a $7 billion gap, which is close to 20% budget shortfall. Go to $3.5 billion in rainy day revenues, which means you could use every penny of it, and you're still cutting 7% off the budget. And we're not going to be alone in that. And the next fiscal year is going to be even worse, projected to be even worse. So the anchor, or one of the anchors to a next relief package, is going to have to be state and municipal aid. The HEROES Act that have already passed out of the House and has nearly $1 trillion in aid to states and municipalities to do things like help fund those teachers programs and public education. Now, that's desperately needed here in Massachusetts. It's desperately needed in plenty of other places across the country as well. And the last piece I'll say on this is in terms of why I think we can have some confidence that it's going to come. We cannot say, hey, we're going to open summer camps, we're going to open daycares, you're going to open schools in the fall. Every reopening plan that we've had in the state and elsewhere says that if you want to limit spread, you have to limit class size. If you're going to limit class size so that kids don't infect other people or too many other people, you can do that by varying the times in which students are actually attending school. But that's limited, because if they're not attending school, they're at home, and then parents have to be home with their kids. Or you shrink class sizes. That means you have to hire more teachers, not less. The cost of this then goes up. Cost of childcare goes up. Cost of schooling goes up. And you're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars across our state alone to try to meet those goals, in addition to the additional spending, to the normal spending. And so the only folks that can meet that backstop is the federal government. Now, the last piece on this, and sorry for the long explanation, President Trump had a 3.5% unemployment rate in February. He's at 17% right now. If he's going to try to make an argument that he's going to deserve re-election, he needs to show, in my opinion, a massive economic growth rate come September and October in order to justify that, hey, things are bad, but it was a novel virus, just we're fixing it. I have a hard time believing he can get to that place without a very robust addition of significant federal dollars to backstop some of these programs. Sorry for the long answer. But.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I have a question. So Chambers of Commerce, we're a 501c6.
Mm-hmm.
We do not right now qualify for the Paycheck Protection Program. We actually don't qualify for a lot of the funding that is available to most businesses, and we are a business. We greatly support businesses, and quite frankly, every week the governor's office, we are a conduit to the business community for the governor's office, for the SBA, for all of these organizations, we tend to be the conduit to connect with the businesses, but we don't get any funding. Do you have any insight on that or thoughts on that, or what would you?
Yes. So there's a number of other chambers in my district had flagged that. We jumped on a bill. I think it's Chris Pappas that has legislation to actually accommodate chambers of commerce in PPP, because for your exact reason, or your reasoning that not only are you a business, but it provides a critical forum to connect business owners to policymakers to be able to have this conversation and get the feedback that we need to adjust these programs. Yeah. I think one challenge that has come with that, given a little bit of the social media feedback here, which is not always the best place for constructive criticism. A number of lobbying firms are also registered as 501c6s. And so and it might just be the fact that I'm in the midst of a campaign, but there was a fair amount of vitriol that then got thrown my way because all of a sudden I was trying to use taxpayer dollars to bail out lobbyists on K Street in Washington, D.C. So I think the messaging there perhaps needs to be a little bit tighter. But I do think that, look, my sessions with local chambers have been invaluable. One, for me, just to get a sense of how things are going and what needs to change. And I think two, normally for those opportunities in my district, we have done these with, as I'm sure Congresswoman Trahan has done with you guys, but with representatives from the SBA, with some of my official casework personnel, to try to provide answer any specific questions, to try to provide additional assistance, any follow-up that's necessary on an individual basis, and with personally or with for businesses and business owners. And that's been invaluable, I think, for them as well, to be able to get answers to questions and make that direct contact when necessary. And so I think this moment has clearly demonstrated how important local chambers are. And they're obviously under enormous stress at the moment. So providing assistance seems to make sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nick had a question next.
It's saying I have low bandwidth, so I can't hear anything right now. My question is, as a youth-serving 501c3 with all the stipulations on opening and everything like that, how can we smooth the transition and make sure that organizations like us, the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA, can survive and overcome this COVID-19 epidemic, with people are losing without jobs and things like that, and limited funding out there at a state and federal level?
Nick, so first off, just thanks for what you guys do. Your Boys and Girls Clubs, I think I saw that on a logo somewhere, right?
Nick is with the Boy Scouts, yes.
Boy Scouts? Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Boys and Girls Club is on the call as well.
Oh, great.
Yeah, here. Uh-huh.
As I think you're aware, there's been multiple recovery packages passed by the House, and a number of them passed into law. The last big one was the CARES Act. The House of Representatives then passed another tranche of funding, $3 trillion, called the HEROES Act. One of the things that the HEROES Act did was actually adjust some of the guidelines and restrictions for the PPP program to enable it to apply to nonprofits. And this has been a big push that an awful lot of feedback that we've gotten is local arts institutions, cultural institutions, organizations like yours, you might have just gone away, but whether it's Boys and Girls Clubs or Boy Scouts or others, that society depends on, quite literally, and particularly obviously for some of you for the summer when school is out, that absent when 45 million people lose their jobs and businesses have been shut down, the traditional ways in which you would receive revenue from either ticket sales or philanthropy or whatever else, that's dried up. And so if we're going to rely on those services, the federal government is literally the only entity that has the ability to backstop it and say, hey, we'll provide that funding and keep that going. And by the way, that's not just the right thing to do, although it's not just a good thing to do, because we still want arts institutions and nonprofits to be able to function. It's the only way to actually allow the economy to open up. As I said, we talked about before, I got a 2-year-old and 4-year-old. it's devastating for her that she doesn't have summer camp, which is a bummer. But you also parents need to. We had plans that she was going to be at summer camp, and so we could go to work. So it creates that shift for everybody, that you then have another problem that you got to deal with because if your kids aren't occupied, someone's got to take care of your kids. So we need those organizations to be able to have the clarity, the certainty, the funding, the resources that are necessary in order to be able to make this work. And last point, that funding is going to go up, not down, because of the additional costs of smaller groups or class sizes, additional costs of disinfectant and disinfecting, and all the other additional layers that have come on top of trying to prepare for prepare for this virus and keep people safe through it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Donata was going to ask a question next.
Yeah, so I, as well with the Boys and Girls Club, Fitchburg, Leominster, Gardner, wonder how, because our revenues are down, how, the government can help us, with that. Like you said, parents need to go back to work. If the economy is going to pick back up again, it's us and after school programs that are there for the children. And we need to be able to help. So, what can we see coming down the pike? Will there be help? There are some grants that we could partner with the schools, like the 21st Century Grant, and some others that it would be helpful if representatives like yourself could meet with the lead educational organizations and, encourage them to partner with us in the afternoon, because the school day is, over by 2, and the parents are not out of work until 5 or 6. So how can we partner with those systems, with the school districts, in order to continue the day for parents? Right now it's hard. The grants are competitive. And we do a good job at grant writing. I'm a good grant writer, and so I do a lot of that. But we need to, be more of a partnership, not a competitive thing going on here. So how can we do something like that? How could you help us with that?
So I'd say a couple of things, Donata. So first off, one way that we can help, and probably the most obvious, is provide more funding, right? Competitive grants are great, but what we're seeing is that there's far more need than the current pot of money will allow for, and competitive grants by definition mean some people don't get it. Well, we need to up that funding so that more institutions like yours, and I've visited a number of Boys and Girls clubs across the state. I was out in Westfield, I think, and maybe Greenfield as well. This was about a month ago, visiting a couple of the Boys and Girls clubs and out in Western and Central Massachusetts. And the services they're providing are absolutely essential. And this was, again, roughly a month ago, so before their summer programs had really kicked up, but they were really wrestling with the question of how, given that, one, how do you deal with this just in general? 2, if we're the only game in town because other summer camps are canceled, we're going to have more people coming in, not less. How do we deal with that influx? 3, maybe we can do some of this outside. One of the facilities had, backed up onto a couple of playing fields. They had space to do it. Another one didn't. And so how do you, just the various complexity of all of these kids, and how do you develop find more proctors or guidance counselors, whatever else in there? How do you train them all for what they need? All of the rest of it. So the kind of myriad complexities that come with this as you start peeling back that onion and you realize layer after layer of what's needed and necessary. And so I do think that one, additional funding just that makes that available is critical. Obviously, 2, that coordination would be really helpful, right? In order to also leverage not just for summer, but for the fall too. If as school boards are trying to figure out, hey, how do we make this work? And do we have capacity? Or are we shortening a school day to 4-hour sessions and running multiple sessions? How do we negotiate that with our teachers? Well, if you guys are at the table there's obviously additional resources and personnel that can help alleviate part of that burden, where you can kind of find a way to just bring it all hands on deck until we get to a point where we can get back to some semblance of normalcy. And so I'd be very happy to help facilitate some of those conversations, and happy in your specific instance, if you haven't brought up to Congressman Johan, happy to help with that as well. Because I do think it would be a really valuable resource to make sure that given the challenges that we're going to be confronting at a state and local level, depending on the timing of this additional assistance, we're going to need everybody trying to figure out where we can kind of put a finger in the crack in the dam.
Exactly. And so sharing resources is very important at this point. If the schools are only going to be, you know, like 1 week on and 1 week off, like I've heard from some of the districts, then the week off, where do the children go? You know, at a Boys and Girls Club, they could be there all day working on academic enrichment, sports, and all of that, and really keeping the kids occupied and engaged during the day. So partnerships like that, I see, you know, would really be important, not only for now, but the future, because we know this is not going to change. This is what, you know, people are saying is the new normal. We're going to have to figure out how to do this, and just sharing information, grades, how we can help the schools with the, you know, we have COVID loss right now. We have a number of kids that, because they've been out of school this long, the academic slide is not just your summer slide. It's a slide from March, you know, all through September. So if we work together, then we can, you know, really make a change. We can really help the children out. So, and then one other thing, sorry, youth workforce readiness.
Yep.
There is not enough money for teens to work during the summer. Mm-hmm. They really do need that opportunity to develop soft skills. If we're going to provide skilled employees for the future, for all these jobs that are going unfilled, we need to start working with the kids, you know, at a younger age, middle school, even, you know, younger. But we need to have enough money to do that. And then also the money for the kids during the summer. Right now, there really is hardly any money for the kids to develop work skills. Mm-hmm. So we need to have, you know, that an influx of funds for that as well.
Oh, agreed. You guys might be singing from the same, you might have the same briefing packet from some of your colleagues and other Boys and Girls Clubs across the state, because that point was made, again, by some of your colleagues in other facilities. I think, so the short answer there is yes. The longer answer here is, you know, it was now probably about 2, maybe 3 months ago, I talked to one of the nation's leading economists whose focus was on economic inequality. And I asked him, I said, look, if you had 2 or 3 suggestions for me, given where the virus was and where it looked like it was going, what would it be? And he said, you know, I am really concerned that the folks that are going to get hit worse by this are children. Because we know particularly lower income children, but schools are shut down, the education gap, that's going to arise. The distance learning, well, distance learning only works for folks that have access to the technology, are fluent in it. If you're reliant on your parents to provide some backstop there, if your parents aren't English, or English isn't your first language, you've got additional challenges. The summer enrichment programs, it's going to be the ones for lower income kids that are going to get cut. It's going to be the support for summer camps that are going to get cut. It's going to be those kids that would otherwise have state funded or philanthropy funded jobs or internships or other programs, those ones that are going to get wiped out, that they're now losing a summer of professionalization, of additional skill acquisition, of soft skills, of experience, of something else on your resume. That part's gone. It's the trauma of having your school year cut short and then not getting that enrichment, and then all of a sudden getting thrown back into school without now having been out of school for 7 months, and that transition. And if you were put in that transition with others that did have that enrichment and you didn't, do you fall farther behind? To say nothing of the potential of foreclosure, job loss, increased anxiety, mental behavioral illness, all of the other myriad factors that we know that kids are exposed to and pick up. They might not present it immediately or might present it in an odd way. And that it was before the searing issues of racial and social justice came up in dominant industries, which provides a level of trauma on top of all of the rest of this. And so, yes, to the summer school and professionalization and enrichment programs, but I think what this also is calling for is a much broader kind of holistic examination of how we provide that pathway, what resources we're going to allow, how we integrate those together, and how we make sure we don't continue to fail so many of our kids.
Right. Well, thank you. And one last thing. Sorry, guys. Buckingham, Brown and Nichols. I'm an alum.
Are you really?
I am.
Why?
So just wanted to shout out to BB&N.
There you go. Thank you.
There you go.
Nice. Our next question is from Pete from Littleton Storage Solutions.
And I'm just wondering, I commend that you're running for Senate. And I think we can vote in this. I think you're on our voting ballot, correct?
I will be. Yes, September 1st.
You'll have my vote, I can tell you that. But
thank you.
Under these, I guess, horrendous conditions throughout our country and in the world, this is a big question, and I know you can't answer it all, but besides how we're going to improve our country, how are we going to get the name of our country in good standings with the rest of the world that we have been partnered with, that this president has seemed to just pull away from?
So, Pete, right?
Yes.
Great question. And I don't know where your background's from, but
I don't know either. I just put it on there, though. So
I was going to say, Littleton, not that it isn't beautiful every time of year, but it's gotten more beautiful than last time.
Yes. I wish there was that much water around here, but there's really not.
I was going to say, I didn't know you're on beachfront property, but yes. So well done on the backdrop.
Thanks.
So look, that's obviously a big question. But I do think part of the answer here is actually somewhat simple. And parts of this are hard and are going to take a long time, but parts of it actually aren't, right? It's a recognition, at least in my eyes, that this country is in fact a special place, and that people look to the United States for as something different. I'll give you one story. I was part of a work trip now, and about 8 years ago, went down to the Philippines. And it was about a year after there was a massive typhoon that went through and basically wiped out an entire island in Leyte in the Philippines. And there were still lines for folks that were trying to get bags of rice because the salt water had gone in and salted out their rice paddies and devastated crops for at least, for a long, long time, years potentially. And you talk to some of the townspeople there through a translator. And the moment that stuck with them was when they saw a U.S. aircraft carrier on the horizon. And what that meant, that the U.S. military came in and provided access to clean water. And what that meant for those folks to know that they were not alone. And so I think part of this really is, it is the confidence that comes from a country that does not fear the future. It is the confidence that comes with a nation that says, look, we're 330 million strong, and we are diverse, and we are different, and we come from different backgrounds and histories and stories, and that is a source of strength, not weakness. It comes with that confidence to then say, hey, we welcome the challenges that are before us because we are going to find a way to empower our population and figure it out, not silence them. And an acknowledgement that justice does not come with a rifle, and it does not come with a boot. It comes through confidence and strength and a willingness to hear other people and a willingness to work it out. And the last piece I'll say is, a friend of mine, British national, said, I have always admired Americans for the way you utter this one simple phrase: we'll figure it out. Whatever problem comes at you, you guys say, I don't know, we'll figure it out. But this actual inherent belief that you will figure it out. And it might take you a little while, but you figure it out. And I think what we need is a president that understands, I do believe, the unique place that the United States holds in our history, the importance of U.S. leadership around the world, the fact that leadership comes from a codified and deep belief, in my view, of human dignity, of human rights, of the power of the individual, that we actually have built a government around to say that you count and we're going to respect your rights. And it might mean that government is messy, but it's messy because we're trying to protect yours and balance yours against somebody else's. And if you believe that, then it means you actually believe that every person around the world has those rights too. And it means that you have an obligation to fight for them too, and stand those voices up and empower those people. And if you believe that, then all of a sudden all these other pieces kind of fall into place a bit. And you should have confidence then about picking about the challenges that we confront, because those challenges are based in literally the recognition of basic human dignity. And I don't think this president views it that way. I think that message is actually pretty simple if you boil it down.
Well, thank you for that. I wish you were leading the country right now, but that's not the case. So good luck with your Senate bid.
September 1st, my friend.
There you go.
Right there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Denise from Shriver Job Corps. And Shriver Job Corps is at right around the corner from here at Devon's. And Denise just had some comments that she wanted to share.
Hey, Denise.
Sorry, I almost forgot to unmute. Hi, I'm Denise. I'm from Shriver Job Corps. It is a pleasure to meet you. All my questions were actually covered previous to this, so I appreciate your input. I also wanted to say, wow, it's evident that you come from the bloodline you do. You are an intelligent young man, and just your last comments that you just said were very impressive to me.
I thought you were referring to the hair, but thank you.
I can't wait for September 1st. But anyway, yeah, I just wanted to do a shout out for Job Corps and express some gratitude from yourself and all the congressmen and women that have supported so much. What we do at Job Corps is very excessive. It's just helping the youth gain knowledge and experience to go out in the workforce. But I know and feel the support we get from Congress, so I just want to express some appreciation.
Thank you. Grateful
today.
Really grateful for what you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Beth from Body, Mind, Spirit Salon and Spa in Groton. Beth, I'm going to unmute.
Thanks. Congressman.
Hey, how are you?
Hi. So I've actually been a federal candidate and lost in a primary last cycle in 2018, but I am a small business owner also. And I know what it's like to run a small business and try to create jobs. And I do think that's the best social program. That's my opinion. So you talk a lot about the spending, and I'm just kind of curious on, with the HEROES Act and the CARES Act, there's a lot that is being spent, and, employees have got $600 on unemployment. Some of them don't want to come back to work because they make more money doing that. I mean, it's been hard. But I think in the bigger picture, there is a lot of spending, and I don't know if you would agree that the lowest, the low unemployment was because of the Jobs Act, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. But if you were a senator, would you vote for rolling that back, or how do we look at the bigger economic picture, with Social Security? So big question, but.
Yeah. And a good one and a fair one. So thank you. And listen, anybody that is willing to put themselves out there and run for office, period, particularly for a Senate race, given my experience with it, it ain't the easiest thing in the world, and it ain't the easiest thing to do with your family. So thanks for running, truly. I also, before I turn to your question, I jumped into a primary because I actually believe that competition does make our party and our system stronger. And if you're going to run, you should be able to defend your positions. And, I've ruffled a few feathers by my decision to do this. But I admire anybody that's actually willing to put themselves out there and go through these paces. Because again, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do always. So let me take your question kind of big on down. Beth, I do have concerns about obviously the size and scope of our federal debt and deficit. I think that every economist that I've talked to for this moment, and we'll talk about this moment here for the second, has said that they were more concerned about going too small, given the nature of the economic crisis now, rather than too big. And that given the massive precipitous fall that we've seen in consumer spending, that the major cutbacks and rollbacks that we'd seen from, and obviously hospitality, restaurants, travel, the rest of it, that the only way to kind of keep some liquidity in that system was to have massive federal spending to back that up, keep paychecks moving. Mm-hmm. And the hope that you keep this kind of the machine more or less functional until the healthcare sector can stabilize, where hopefully that's a vaccine, but even in the transmissions come down, so that you can get back into some semblance of normalcy. That will be activity levels will be depressed from where they were, but then hopefully, if we have a vaccine in more or less, we'll call it a year-ish, hopefully it's faster. But once you get to widespread inoculation, that we should be, on that glide path back up to where we were before, but that might take another year plus from now to do so. But that this is not, if we provide that liquidity now, you're not looking at this potentially sustained 10-year economic recovery, that this picks back up a little bit more quickly. And the concern from folks that I have talked to about this, of saying, if we don't provide that financial infusion, and you start to look at a massive foreclosure crisis and new home stop and all the rest of it, that actually becomes harder to build out of rather than easier. Now, all of that being said, we've got major structural drivers to our debt and deficit that I think at some point do become an issue. I don't think you or I can say exactly when all of a sudden interest rates go from essentially 0 to 8%. But I can tell you that a lot of the programs that I care about, if those interest rates were back up at 6% or 7%, they crowd out those programs that I want to spend money on, right? So it is in our interest to try to get this under control. Where you and I probably do have a bit of a disagreement is, well, perhaps I should say, I don't want to speculate, but I do think that if we look at revenues as a percent of GDP, and again, take the COVID time out of this, because I think that's an unfair, I've got a lot of issues with this administration, and I might have done the COVID response a bit differently. But again, the economic infusion here is not my biggest difference with them. I do think that we need to shave spending. We need to raise revenue, and I don't think that while there was actually some broad-based agreement that our tax system was in need of overhaul, I don't believe that the way in which it was done was in fact the best way to balance some of those needs for economic investment, while simplifying some of the tax code and making our businesses more competitive. Last piece on this, I do think that I think one of the tensions that we see is that our economy has evolved in a way that our federal policies have not. And I'll speak to this again. In Massachusetts is one of 28 states across the country where the cost of early childcare from birth to 5 is more expensive than tuition at our public universities. It is more expensive year on year to care for a newborn to age 5 to when they enter public school than to send your kid to college. And you got 18 years to save for it in a 529 plan. That's so because for most of the people that were in charge in office, they came about in a time where dad worked and mom took care of the kids, and that was still enough to get you to a comfortable lifestyle. That is not the case anymore. So we actually need to, in my mind, look at things like childcare and look at how we classify a public good and actually make more investment in things like that, which is going to cost money. It's expensive. I think we can pay for it. I do think that we have to raise revenue to do so.
By how much? No.
You don't
have to answer. You don't have to answer. A little tweak, that's all.
Right.
But thank you for your concern.
But I take your point, and at some point here it becomes an issue, right?
Well, and not to keep on talking, but there are some groups in Massachusetts that want to do the mandatory retirement for small businesses, and they're gearing up to that on the next ballot question. The last one was the grand bargain with Governor Baker, and I think he did a great job on trying to balance that, on minimum wage. But as a small business owner, again, I'm speaking from that position here. It's that, the margins sometimes are so slim, and we know that we do as government, having served in government, you go to the businesses a lot to try to fund. And it just seems like it's a little overwhelming now thinking about all the money that's been spent, what's going to happen down the road and what your policy would be. But you answered it.
And Beth, the last thing there, and forgive me because I haven't seen the updated numbers on this, but before the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, and again, you are well aware of this given your prior service, but corporate tax revenues were only about 10% of the overall tax pie that we have, right? Even if you kind of went to the extreme of tax the heck out of businesses, you're not going to balance, you're not going to generate the revenue I want to generate off of solely business taxes alone. And you get to a point there where you obviously make U.S. businesses non-competitive. They're just going to do what plenty of companies from Massachusetts did, which is go get a P.O. box in Ireland, and all of a sudden you're an Irish company that inverted, right? And so that's complicated, and you got to go through that policy, right? But that is where I think, if you do share my belief here of saying, look, society has moved, we now basically, to the extent that you can, require both parents to work in order to afford the lifestyle that you want. Somebody's got to take care of those kids. Somebody's got to pay for college, which is getting more expensive, not less. Somebody's got to come up with this money. We've seen massive accumulation of wealth. There are ways to actually structure this in a way that is more balanced, I would argue more progressive and fairer than the structures put in place by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Also recognizing that you're not going to wholly be able to balance that off of corporations, but there's ways in which corporations, I think, can help. They can provide, just like you make a contribution to a retirement fund, you can make a contribution obviously to student loans, you can make a contribution to early childcare. Right? You can. There's ways we can get creative about how we actually fill this hole.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as we're getting near the end of our time to chat with you, my last question is, so right now the dialogue politically really revolves around COVID and Black Lives Matter, which are both very important. But how do we get to know, what can we know about you to let us get to know you a little bit better? We might not know yet.
Oh God. What do you need to know about me? So that's a great question. I don't think I've been asked that one in a while. So I guess a little bit about me. I'm born and raised here in Massachusetts, got a twin brother. We went off to college actually together in California. Loved my time out in the San Francisco Bay Area. Ended up coming back from California. I was actually an engineer by training. I was a terrible engineer, but I'm an engineer by training. Went to the UN for a little while, basically kind of as an intern, and then went off to the Peace Corps. Was in the Dominican Republic for about 2.5 years, which, of course, just my luck, was the year that the Red Sox decided to win their first World Series in 90 years. So that was fun, being away for it, which was really lovely. But I remember listening to it on a shortwave radio in the midst of a power outage, screaming up and down, and you jumping up and down, listening to David Ortiz knock home runs against the Yankees in the ALCS. So spent 2.5 years in the Dominican Republic, came back, went to law school, did a fair amount of legal aid work when I was in law school, and then a prosecutor's office and a couple different offices around our Commonwealth. And one of the big things there, Melissa, was the impact of mental health. And it's been one of my major areas of focus ever since, because I saw, you see every single day the way in which our society treats mental health, which is that we criminalize it. The largest providers of mental health services in our country are the jails in LA and Chicago. If you talk to our sheriffs who run our jails here in Massachusetts, they'll tell you that roughly between 80 to 90% of all of the incarcerated individuals are suffering from mental illness, substance use disorder, or both. And I saw it every day in a courtroom, right? You saw the impact of addiction. I had plenty of cases where a couple of kids would break into 4 or 5 homes in a night, 4 or 5 homes in a weekend, or 15 cars in a night, trying to get spare change. And at that point, the GPSs that people had in their cars. And the idea that is enough, and somehow that is the way, because people struggle to advocate for themselves because of the stigma associated with mental illness, because an opioid addiction and dependency, that was because people couldn't voice that and felt shame in voicing it, or talking about their child or their friend or their parent that was struggling with it. We just forced them to live in the shadows on it. And if people didn't get better, they weren't going to be incarcerated. 90% of heroin users started on pills. And plenty of, as I'm sure you all have stories too, plenty of people just had knee surgery or shoulder surgery or slipped on ice and started taking a couple of pills because the doctors prescribed them, and all of a sudden they were hooked. And so that has been a big area of focus of mine, because I think we can do an awful lot better. And I guess the last point I'll say on this is, look, I got into a Democratic primary, not because I think that the incumbent is a bad guy, but because I think there's an awful lot more that Massachusetts should expect that comes with a Senate seat here, that this position is a extremely unique one, not only because there's only 100 senators, but because it provides a platform and a voice for the holder of that position to go out there and advocate for our country and advocate for our Commonwealth, and take whatever ideas that you have, agree or disagree, but put them forward and actually help guide our country through a really tumultuous time. And I don't think that's the way that Senator Markey views this position. I don't think that's the way he's going to view that position. I don't think if you don't view that position after 50 years in office, I don't think you change for years 50 to 56. But I think Massachusetts deserves more. And I look forward to making that case in the 69 days to go until we get there for the primary. So thank you for having me, everybody. I'm grateful for it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. On behalf of the Nashoba Valley Chamber, again, thank you, Congressman Kennedy, for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to join us. This was thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you. Keep in touch, please.
Absolutely. Thank you to the Mount Wachusett Community College for being our public policy series sponsor. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.